Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our colleagues and friends who are joining us from different parts of the world today. We are really excited and also humbled to welcome you all here today to begin. And we're going to start by kicking off the IC3 Festival 2021 with the virtual workshop for counselors. Now, this is a very special segment at the beginning of the festival. And this is special because we have dedicated it exclusively to topics that are relevant to the day-to-day work of career and college counselors from around the world. So in keeping with our theme for the year, which was Onward, we've put together two wonderful workshops for your benefit today. And these workshops are going to be addressing topics that are taking center stage in how the pandemic has reshaped the world of career and college counseling. So before we get into the sessions for today, we want to just share a few housekeeping rules with all of you. First and foremost, we'd like to invite you all to please keep your video camera on. We really want to build our sense of community here, and we want to feel connected to everyone and really have an opportunity to have meaningful engagement. So it'll be wonderful to see you all on the screen. So kindly keep the video camera on. We also request you to keep your microphone muted. And if you'd like to ask a question towards the end, we will be able to unmute you at that point. And during the session or even before the session, if you have any questions that are pertaining to the topic that the session is about, then please feel free to drop it into the chat box. So you can see the chat box in the panel either below or on the side of your screen, depending on the device that you're using. There'll be a small icon for chat there, so please use that to drop your questions. We do plan to have a live Q&A towards the end of the session, where the panelists will be choosing from the questions that you have shared in the chat, as well as a couple of the audience live questions as well. So as you are joining the workshop from the IC3 Festival platform, please remember to use the networking feature as well. It's a wonderful opportunity to connect with not only our distinguished panelists who are here today, but also with your fellow delegates from schools and universities from around the world. So each session is for a duration of about 40 minutes. So we'd like to encourage you to please attend both the sessions. The topics are very interlinked and they flow together well, and it's going to create a very holistic learning experience for you. So please do stay on for both the sessions. Okay, so let us begin with our first session for the day. This session is titled, Where Does the Square Peg Fit? Understanding the Evolved Concept of Best Fit in a Post-Pandemic World. So we chose this topic because the pandemic has brought us to an understanding that what we used to think of once as the future world of work has now become the present world of work. And with this rapid evolution in the industries, in job roles, in work styles, and in overall development, it's very important to assess the impact on the career guidance dynamics. So in this session, our experts are going to focus on three things. The first one is the resultant and anticipated changes in higher education, the relationship between higher education pathways and outcomes, and finally, the parameters that will now make up for understanding best fit for students. So for our session, we have a very special expert panel. They're joining us from high school, university, and industry and sharing their insights on the topic. So please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Ali Imran, Vice President of External Engagements at Ashoka University. He'll also be our lead moderator for the session today. Ms. Tiffany Goulet, who's the University Counselor at Oberoi International School. Mr. Anbumunee Ponniah, who's the Lead Architect, HDM Solutions at IBM India. Mr. Eddie West, who's the Assistant Dean of International Strategy and Programs at San Diego State University. And Ms. Kala Anand, who's the Director of Partnerships and Services at Kriya University. So thank you, and over to you, Mr. Ali, to kick off our session.
Thank you, Kritika. Wonderful to be here with everyone. Thank you to Tiffany and Kala and Anbu and Eddie for being here. I think we're going to discuss something that has concerned us all over the last 2 years. In any case, that's what we do on a daily basis, but the last 2 years have just brought into focus that things cannot continue to be the way that they were. I'm talking specifically about, of course, we have a school counselor audience, but I'm talking about what's happening at universities, what's happening at the workplace. In the higher education sector, we've all had to come to terms with the fact that campus may not be the only place that people will come to study because they've just been kept away physically. And we've all had to learn how to deal with that. Most of us have learned how to do it, but there are still many things that we need to learn. Mental wellness has become one of the key issues for students of all ages. In terms of technological understanding, in terms of technological advancement, another thing that the pandemic has accelerated. So there's been change all around, and in all the parts of the funnel that are represented today, there has been change. So what we're going to do is we will start with the first part of the funnel, which in fact, while Tiffany represents that, all of you also, many of you represent that too. We'll go on to then talk about what's happening at the university level with Kala and Eddie, and then we'll come to Anbu to talk about what's happening at the industry level and what changes have happened. Once that is done, I'll ask a couple of questions based on the conversation that has happened before, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So that's the structure really. So I would request each of the four panelists to speak for a couple of minutes based on this common understanding. And Tiffany, we'll start with you because you're actually the closest to the school audience, and you had to deal with the impact of the pandemic and on all the things that it has brought onto this audience. So why don't we start with you, Tiffany?
Yes, thanks. I was actually pretty comfortable until you said I was representing all the counselors out there, and then I got a little nervous. I mean, I think from our side, you know, we've seen kids demanding different things for a while now. You know, they're not really willing to sort of be lemmings and just kind of go and sit in classes in university anymore. There's so many different options out there, and I find that my kids are really looking for best fit, which sometimes looks a little different than, you know, the norm. They're looking at universities where you can move around every year. They're looking at universities that have, you know, options to do a lot of hands-on co-op internships. So I haven't really seen that much of a change for that. You know, they've always worried about the future. I can't tell you how many students come to us and ask, like, we have a crystal ball about, you know, what jobs are going to be needed in 6 years, and you know, what's going to happen with this. And so I think that that's kind of the hard part, is now, you know, this uncertainty has kind of maybe been exasperated a little bit because they've been at home worrying with fewer distractions. And I think sometimes families add to that, unfortunately. I do think that the biggest change I've seen is just sort of, I've had some parents that want to keep their kids close to home because of the pandemic. And I've had other families flip-flop and say, no, we thought we wanted them to stay home, but now we want them to go. So I think that's one of the biggest, but I think the numbers sort of ended up being about the same. Yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, the whole idea of this square peg, you know, round hole kind of thing, I kind of feel like more and more of the students I'm working with have no interest in the round hole. They're expecting you guys to create, you know, a place for them. You know, we're just seeing a lot more sort of intolerance, I think, with the jobs the way they are, and, you know, working and not being able to pay the rent. In the US especially, we're seeing lots of people quitting their jobs with no plan B, but they're just tired of the status quo. And so I think that's been a big thing. And so we've been talking a lot about sort of, you know, having options so that when you go to university and when you graduate, you're not sort of pigeonholed into one career, especially, you know, so you have skills where you can go to different places. But yeah, I think the beautiful thing from my side is that I find kids are being a little bit more selfish in a good way. You know, they want you guys to figure out what's going to work for them instead of changing who they are to make you guys happy, which is great. The only thing I think my concern is that in Mumbai, you know, schools have been closed for 1.5 years. And so my students are worried that they don't have the skills that they need when they get to university. So I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is just making sure that, you know, the universities are ready to kind of upskill them or, you know, deal with some mental health issues, because they've been alone for a long time.
Yeah. Thanks, Tiffany. In fact, I think you're right about the impact of not being in physical school on the kids, because on the one hand, we say we want application-based and hands-on education. On the other hand, the kids haven't got their hands on to anything for the last 2 years, except a laptop or a tab. For example, as we discussed when you and I spoke, the science kids haven't done an experiment and haven't done a practical. So, the learning's really been incomplete and it has been impacted. Kala, why don't we go on to you and hear from you what's happening in the higher education space?
Thanks, Ali. I'll wear my hat in a couple of areas. One, of course, as a higher ed professional, but also as somebody who handles careers at Korea, and just seeing that interlinkages between education and careers, right? So at every time when there's been such a big global event, career landscape changes, and that always forces some tectonic shifts in education. We've seen that over the last couple of decades, every time, whether that's in terms of the digital transformation that came in when borders became a little bit more closer. So clearly the contemporary careers themselves, we're kind of seeing post-pandemic, they're not going to be in silos, because the challenges now are going across multiple domains. So I think one of the biggest changes that I see, and I'll connect the careers back to education, is that the post-pandemic, the career contours are going to constantly move, right? So graduates of tomorrow, they can't look at a career block as a fixed piece and, try to park themselves for a success within that. The piece, the puzzle and the pieces actually are going to be in this floating motion, if you like, right? And hence the more adaptable one is and quick enough to navigate the path, I think that's the better chances of fitting into this landscape. So the job clusters are now replacing these vertical career trajectories. And it's about how do you have the content knowledge and apply to multiple contexts. Now, when I mean multiple contexts, it's multiple industries, it's varied outcomes, whether that's professional, vocational, or research, right? So what are some interesting changes that's happening? I think post the pandemic, it's been interesting as well. As more reliance on digital has come here, you see tech firms that now are hiring, let's say, linguists. Because they want them to work across countries and cultures. You have engineering firms. Sustainability has become such an important word post the pandemic, and health outcomes have become so important. So you have people who are either looking at health policy experts or energy experts, bioinformatics. This has come again in mainstream industry. You also saw a lot of issues around families and what happened with the number of deaths that happened. So again, law firms working with social policy experts. You're beginning to see entertainment industry, the OTT has revolutionized. Now with OTT growing so much post-pandemic, data specialists, who give customer insights. So this is kind of, I think, creating some of these floating niches within the broader space. So now, how is this impacting a lot of education? So clearly industry is not asking for a Bachelor of Economics, right? So they're seeking graduates who understand what is optimum resource allocation. Can you comprehend the impact of variable forces, let's say in business? And that's what they're looking for with some competencies. I think now, whether it's data storytelling, communication, research methodologies, and all of that. So now I think talk about the higher education impact, as the businesses and nations now have become more focused on business outcomes, research output, innovative products, again for larger social good, minimizing the impact, whether that's environmentally, and also trying to create globally acceptable solutions, because now the world is shrunk quite literally. So they are looking at a talent that can also become multi-layered. So this future of work has impacted, I think, to a great extent, the higher ed policy, the landscape, both in India and the world. Let me give you some examples of what's happening around the world, right? So globally, the T-shaped education journey is now being endorsed very actively, that you need a core disciplinary strength, but you better kind of have that multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. That's in demand. The vocational education system that's always endorsed by Germany and Canada, which is about job-ready skills, because you now have a new product, it's launching, you immediately need labor out. That's continuing to be a success story, and that's going to get replicated in many countries, right? New Zealand has now gone into complete adopting the whole innovation-focused education model. So again, a huge focus on applied research. A country like Switzerland has upped its spend, GDP on research and development. Today, they stand at almost above 3%, whereas the global average is 2.38%. So clearly higher education is focused on research outcomes, right? The Dutch have always had a very interesting binary model, a professional track and a research track. Now they're going to aggressively pursue that, both outcomes of education. A decade ago, I think when this whole concept of multidisciplinary came together, Melbourne Model in Australia tried to replace their 96 undergraduate courses by 6 broad degrees, because they believe that an undergraduate education has to be broad-based and you specialize in a post-graduation. And they're kind of furthering that plan as well. The co-op program that Tiffany spoke about as well, again, practical experiences, real-world attributes from Canada, that is now getting replicated because people are automatically seeing these graduates seem to work well. But again, very interestingly, what another angle that's actually changing is the industry integrated curriculum that UK and Australia have quite significantly, looking at progressing, especially in areas of psychology, law, and actuarials and data, where the industry kind of recognizes the academic qualification and offers membership, right? So I think this bit is happening across the space to create a globally attractive talent pool post the pandemic. And in India, I think clearly the new education policy is trying to keep pace. The multiple subject options, the immersive learning options, the real world arts practitioners and industry into mainstream curriculum, the focus on research competency. I think all these are great developments. What would be interesting or important to see, and personally I'd like to see, is what's the emphasis on the whole digital storytelling, the digital ethics and collaboration that we're going to have. How are we going to create more industry recognized curriculum that creates globally portable degrees? Currently, we seem to be having the twin track, industry operating and academia operating here, and you have to study, to train to get to industry. So I think my passing remark for counselors really at this point tuned in is to say that when you meet your students, for instance, and he, she, or they, let's say, is interested in computer science, because that translates into a promising job, right, in the tech industry, I think dig deeper. We need to find out what about computer science they enjoy, what impact they want to create with that knowledge, what kind of industries excite them. And that opens up a multitude of conversations and options, right? And then you channel the conversation to a best fit. Is it an academic pathway? Is it a research pathway? Is it a professional pathway? Is it a vocational pathway? And then that becomes the most suited career journey. And if we follow, I guess, this process, that's probably the best way to assess what a return on investment in education look like. So that's just my opening remarks, but happy to keep the conversation going as we proceed with the Q&A.
Thank you, Kala. It was a pretty sweeping summary, actually, of what's happening, not just in India, but across the world. And like you rightly said, I think the new education policy is trying to keep pace. It's just that we haven't started implementing it, but clearly there is an understanding of the need for multidisciplinary education. By the way, Delhi University has said yesterday that they're likely to have a common entrance exam next year. So that's, the UGC has said that there should be a common entrance exam. So I think that's another new thing. So the weightage of the boards, which has always been so important, will go down. We used to talk about the future of work and how these kids will have 10 jobs by the time they're 40. Many of those jobs are already there much earlier than we had thought. So it's all changing very fast. And I don't blame the counselors for wondering what to do with all these kids who ask these questions. And as a father myself, I know there are 1,000 questions which you can't really answer. But they look to us to find those answers, and we owe it to them to give them the answers which respect their questions. Eddie, it's early morning for you. Actually, it's like late night for you. But we're really looking forward to hearing from you, your perspective on what has changed and what needs to change for everyone to do justice really to their students.
Sure. Thank you, Ali, and thank you everyone for being here and for having me. I was reflecting on the title of the session before we got on today about the square peg idea, and I think the thing that struck me immediately is the importance of remembering that over time that square often changes shape, right? That we talk a lot about what's happening in the external environment and the incredible change that COVID has ushered in. And I think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that the best of education, including the counselor-student relationship, is this journey of self-discovery, right? And I'll just tell a brief, I figured I'd just open up by telling a brief story, if I may, about myself when going way back in time, Stone Ages, when I was a young person, 17 to 16 years old. I was absolutely 100% sure that I wanted to be a professional sportscaster when I grew up. That was my career trajectory. I loved sports. I breathed sports. I ate, slept, and you name it, sports. And I knew I wanted to be a broadcaster. And my dream was to one day broadcast the US football Super Bowl. So I diligently, assiduously set my path on which university here in the United States would give me the best chance to be a successful sportscaster. So I ended up applying accordingly. I applied to the University of Missouri, Columbia, great broadcast journalism school, Syracuse University, great broadcasting program, University of Houston, great broadcasting program. And wouldn't you know it, fate interceded, and I didn't get the amount of financial aid that I was hoping to be able to afford to go out of state to one of those schools. I was living in California at the time. So I stayed locally and did my undergrad locally, where I could pay in-state tuition and have a less expensive education. And in the course of those first 2 years, when I was exposed to that broad-based curriculum that Kala and Tiffany was referring to, the liberal arts, my eyes and my world opened up, and I was introduced to all of these different subject areas, many of which I had no idea about or that I had interest in: sociology, English, many other of these disciplines. And longer story shorter, I fell in love with literature. And so I decided I'm not going to be a journalism major, which I respect journalists to the hilt. It's such an esteemed profession. But that is a more practical track of study than the liberal arts are, right? So I chose the impractical route, went and studied English, stayed locally, and my entire world and my entire life trajectory changed as a result. And I'm not suggesting there's a right or wrong to any of that, as much as to say, you know, when I was a 17-year-old, I was a square peg looking for that square hole of broadcast journalism. And had I stayed on that path, I might have really foreclosed a lot of other opportunities. So I think it's important, right? And counselors, great counselors know this, but students maybe less so, and parents maybe less so. Important to keep that open mind and to approach the college and career search process with a certain degree of humility and flexibility and openness to that journey of self-discovery and transformation. So, you know, yes, COVID has just rocked our world, but some fundamentals never change. And that is that, you know, young people are always going to be a work in progress. And hopefully we are as well, not so young people. So that those are just some initial observations I would share.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I think I'll ask you to speak to my 13-year-old who wants to be a gaming YouTuber. And he thinks that the educational path to that is to not study at all. So I think there's some very interesting things you said there. And the fact that you have to be open to different influences in your education. Anbu, we'll come to you for your opening remarks. And essentially the output in many ways, except for students who go on to do higher education, and even those later, the output is what you receive. And you would have observed over time some changes, and you may also be wanting some changes. So I think let's just talk about those as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ali. Glad to be here. So just like everything else, the pandemic seems to have occurred at a specific time when there are all other changes also happening. We were in the post-truth world. There is great awareness about social equality, the injustice that is going on. The diversity and inclusion has really found its roots, and individuals are more have had more time to reflect on what they would want to do. So when they arrive at our gates, and when the industry picks them up, these are not individuals that can be shaped into any thing, right? So which means in the past, industries could approach individuals coming out of a pipeline, and then they just asked to do whatever the industry wants them to do. And then, maybe after 5 years, then they figure out that, okay, actually, this is not what I want to do. I want to do, something slightly different. And then they then find their path. Today, there is a need for the industry to actually provide that transparency, right? And assurance that the paths are open from day one. These multiple paths are open. And them, starting on one particular path does not exclude them to pursue another path, say, in just 3 months' time. So that's something that we as industry had to react to. And that's something that's not, from industry perspective, we want to solve a problem, period. It's not whether it's the right way to solve or it's the most inclusive way to solve and things like that. But now, all of these criteria are becoming, inherent to, how we approach the way we, create products and the way we actually look at, folks joining us from the academia. So when students do join in, there is also an expectation that they are looking for specific skills and specific type of jobs and things like that. And while you did talk about, we look for the other side of the story, right? The square pegs looking for, we come with specific shapes, holes, and try to fit those pegs, right? So whichever is able to enter in, we'll just shape that up. That had to change, and that again, that change has been going on, and then the pandemic just accelerated all of these in a much faster way. So that's really the key that we are looking at. So what it means for industry in terms of what we expect from the academia, right, is also we are not asking for people to know exactly one particular tool on how to do it, right? In fact, now if you look at some of our interviews that we are conducting, we just say, pick your programming language, pick your, if it is a computer science type of a job, pick your programming language, pick your tool. And we just want to solve problems. Are you able to understand the context of it? Why we want to solve it? What approaches would you take? And it's just not computer science, right? So if you look at design, that's also, undergoing such a massive change. Earlier, if you have to come up with a, somebody gets a design job, be it marketing, creative design versus a product design, right, of a furniture company, right? So the type of portfolios that students were asked to create used to highlight their talent in terms of the nuances of design rather than the practicality or the process of design. So there is a clear change that we are seeing in the industry where there's a lot of weight given to the process of the thought process of coming up with a design, the utilitarian aspects, the green aspects. So there are so many other forces that are coming into fore, and those were always the forces, but those used to be what you call a highlight point. Now it has become the foundation point for many of our recruitments. So those such changes is what I'm looking at, and as counselors, what can we do? I totally enjoyed the story that Eddie just shared. In many ways that reflects my journey also. I got a job as an Air Force in Indian Air Force as a pilot officer. I had a job as a IT professional, and within IT professional, I got the cool job of actually deep into the operating system research. And I hated it. Actually, I picked that IT job and I hated it the first 2 years. And it took me 2 years to realize that and then shape a career path that slowly led to where I am now. So there's no right or wrong decisions at that point in time. It's really, as Kala was mentioning, what type of a repertoire that we want to put together. It's, if you think of our career as a vocation, a journey, that we want to carry a tool set and some backpack and all of those. So what would we wanted in that backpack? What would we want to collect? That's really the journey, right? And it's not what we start with. The path we take is going to work out. So which means there are probably a few indications that we need to look for in the first few steps. And as industry, the criteria we're looking for is the willingness to learn, to jump in and deal with ambiguity and so forth, right? And a thinking process that they are able to master, and that is transferable to anything from computer science to teaching to a product design to manufacturing to many things, right? So it's that is the foundation that we are looking for, and of course somebody knows the specific tool, somebody knows something more is always an advantage, but that became the core that we are now drilling down. There's one last thing that I would say is there's also, we are starting to experiment with new ways of recruitment. There's no longer a test interview hire type of recruitment that we are seeing as becoming the norm now. We actually want to observe students in more real life scenarios. We provide them, access to the true problems that we in the industry are solving. Imagine, this used to be group discussions, like where we would assess how they, perform in team dynamics. Now we are giving them a week, assemble a team. Let's go ahead and solve a problem. And during this week, there is an observer, a mentor, and an observer placed in the team, and we can, figure out more about students in that 1 week that we can do in, maybe a dozen interviews and dozen tests. Right, that's something that as an experiment is becoming successful. So in computer science, you see Kaggle like competitions being the pipeline through which we are attracting talent, and which means those ability to actually perform in these types of scenarios is something that we need to ingrain into the students. Students are still individuals when they come in, and then they need to now find their role, find their place in a team setting. And that's something that we are asking them to do in a week is a bit unfair too, right? So if counselors can help them get into that mindset of, there is a aspect of what you do, right? What tools you apply and what your role is, right? The job description. And then there is the environment in which we do that job. And that part we are actually seeing a lot of the kids are not prepared for. And when pandemic hit and this type of remote work happens, now that's something that you can't naturally, learn by just being in the team, right? So you're still alone, you're still through a WebEx, the culture aspects of those, and how do you collaborate? How do you innovate together? All of these are becoming challenges for the new generation of things. So again, if counselors can help in those aspects, those are some of the observations I can probably share, Ali, at this point in time.
That's actually fascinating, Anbu. And I think the fact that you're talking about real life problems, giving them a week, I mean, these are all very new things. And obviously, I think industry also realizes that the old ways won't work because the problems facing industry are not the old problems. So
Absolutely.
As it happens, I think we have only about 10 minutes to go. I think we'll cut now to the audience questions. There is a question about, and maybe Kala or Eddie, maybe you could take this first. At what age can a child think about the path that they want to follow? Is there a specific age range? Kala?
Interesting, right? Not really. I think it's not a path, but I think a child, the best thing to do is earlier off, try and cancel out what they don't like to do. I think that's really important. I often look at it like that. In my own case, my daughter earlier on figured, I don't want to be in an office room. I want to be working with people. I don't enjoy sitting in front of a computer system and working. So she's a community psychologist, and that's what she does. So I think the way to do that is no better opportunity than to start immersing them. So right from their 9th grade, 10th grade, let them kind of get those immersive opportunities, whether that's studying certain industries or projects, immersing themselves under training. I think the process of elimination is probably better than trying to find out, because your options are very wide. So you start with the process of elimination, which is a fabulous time to start in 14 or 15, when a kid knows this is not something I enjoy. I love science, but if I love science, what are some things I don't want to do with that love in science, and what are things that I want to do? The assumption that they like science, they will become a doctor, that's the worst assumption for us to make. The best assumption to make is they love science, but maybe they're better off doing health policy, because this kid understands the impact of science on community and enjoys that. I think that if we start the process of elimination is far better than trying to navigate to find the option. That's my take.
That's interesting, actually. And I think, and probably worth thinking about for everyone, including us as parents. There is a question that more than one person is asked, and this has to do with parent mindset, which is the biggest challenge they've faced is in influencing the mindsets of parents about the new ways of thinking. And, the fact that most Indian parents still think of medicine and engineering as the place to go, or they will give you data about, well, whatever you may say, it is these niches which attract the highest salaries. So how do you fix that? Any of you can actually take that. Maybe Anbu, you should take it because you are the one who recruits actually.
Yeah. So let's be honest, right? So I'll give a small story. We were three friends, and one of them went to IIT, another went to an ordinary college, science, based college. Another went to an arts college, and we met again after 20 years at the 20-year reunion. And the person who went to IIT got the most opportunities right off the block, and founded his own startup. Now working as a chief operating officer in one of the startups later on. The person who went to the science college is myself. I'm a executive architect with a multinational company, not doing bad at all. In fact, at a higher position than the person who went to IIT. The person who went to the arts college is leading the electronic vehicles research program for one of the up and coming electrical vehicle research program in up and coming. So we tend to do what we call as a greedy algorithm here, right? We look at what's immediately in front of our eyes and then jump to conclusions that something is better versus not. That's not the case personally. And what we also are observing in the industry is that it does not matter which college somebody's background is from. It gives them more exposure. They're more ready for the day one, that's for sure. But 6 months, and definitely by 6 years, these things just cancel out. And it actually, we see there are gyms that easily overtake, prestigious colleges in no time at all. So I would probably leave it at that, right? I'm not a person who says, do this, do that, but these are good observations, and counselors can definitely use this to their, to guide students.
There's an interesting question
Can
about.
I chime in, Ali?
Sorry, of course, Tiffany.
Can I just chime in? So there's a couple things that we've been doing at our school to kind of help parents get on board. One of them is we do a parent book study, because we find that the parents really don't know how to parent in 2021 and what that looks like. And so we've been kind of giving them some ideas, and there's some great books out there that you can read together, like How to Raise an Adult. And there's a ton more. And so you read them together and then you discuss what parenting looks like in 2021. And I think that can be a great way for counselors to kind of have these conversations with parents. A second thing we do is we do an intro to university counseling, and we invite everybody, kindergarten all the way up through grade 12, so that they can see what the different plans are, that the school has a plan, first of all, and what liberal arts is, what it looks like if you go to law school in different countries, because they have a lot of questions and they just don't know what options are out there. And then the third thing we do is a huge career day at the end of the year. And we have a ton of parents come in and present, and they talk to each other. And the biggest question that we do is, who are you and what do you do and how did you get there? Because I think it's really important for kids to understand that very few of us went from A to B. Most of us had pit stops and U-turns and everything else, and that's totally normal. I don't know anybody who had A to B, unless they're kind of just lying to themselves and just doing it just because they don't want to, change their plan. But I think that that's been great. And the other thing we do at that day is we have alums come in and talk to the 11th graders about, starting this journey about looking for universities. And then we have the alums stay and talk to the parents. And that's been great too, so that parents start to realize that there's lots of opportunities out there. There's lots of different universities. There's not just the 12 that you can name off the top of your head. And so I think that there's a lot of really concrete things if counselors are willing to invest in the parents and get them on board. Because I do think parenting now sort of looks a little bit different than it did a couple of years ago, or they think it's supposed to look different. Whereas actually, if they parented like their parents parented, the kids would be okay, you know, because most of our parents, I think, were pretty hands off. And now I think parents think that you have to be really super engaged. And really, if they would just sort of back off and let kids make their mistakes, everybody would be happier. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Ali, but I just thought that that would be kind of some really concrete things
not at all.
for counselors to do.
Actually, that was pretty close to what Anbu said about giving the students a week to solve a problem. I mean, what you're doing is making it immersive for the parents. I think we are almost out of time. I'll try to get in a couple more questions very quickly. And this one is a loaded one actually for us in the higher education business. Maybe Eddie and Kala, you can take this. Coursera or a proper university, which is a better option?
You go first, yeah.
Sure. At the risk of demonstrating my bias, I will say, if you're going to make it a binary choice like that, traditional higher ed university experience is the way to go. I think what the last kind of dialogue so fascinating really revealed is, again, I mean, it's not so much about, yes, learning skills are all important. We all know that. We all pursue skill development. But higher education at its best is about a lot more than that. It's about a lot more than just merely ticking off these skill development boxes. And Coursera and platforms like it, they have a very important role to play. I think they can be great in supplementing higher education, a well-rounded formal education, but replacing it, I honestly think that is very myopic, very dangerously short-sighted. And the one thing I'll just tie into that, maybe turn over to Kala for thoughts, is, you know, the examples that fascinating in the chat, I can't even keep up with it all, but the examples of parents coming and saying, look at these statistics on what the best jobs are. And, you know, my son or daughter has to go for this conventional career. To borrow a sports analogy again, you know, that's kind of rushing to where the ball is right now. What's important is understanding where that ball may go in the future. So you can't just be fixated on a snapshot in time. What skill development is going to help me advance down the field? It's much more about learning how to learn and retaining that flexibility and development. So you know, with all due respect to Coursera, please keep it in its proper context, I would say.
That's a square peg in a square hole.
Yeah.
Coursera is a square peg in a square hole. Yes, please. Hello.
Sorry, Ali. Sorry. Yeah, just a minute on that. I agree with what Eddie said. Technology is an enabler. Technology is not mainstream. We have to recognize its role as an enabler. And the fact is that a school or a college or a university is the first social setting your child goes to. Now, if it is about getting academic qualifications, you could do homeschooling, you could sit at home through your life, but you set out for other reasons. And clearly, as we heard from Anbu, the idea is not, degrees don't guarantee that, it's much more than degrees. So I guess that supplementing works. The other couple of things to break in terms of myth with parents or for counselors, I think it's useful, is that careers are not vertical ladders. They cease no longer to be vertical ladders. There was a time you join as a management trainee, junior engineer, associate, and you kind of go your life up to that. It's not happening. Today, careers have become lateral. They progress. You could do the same position in India, you jump to another country and do that position, third country and do the position on the same level. So the breadth of experiences are going to be more important than the vertical growth. I guess that's really, really important to understand. Even if parents are throwing statistics at you, ask them to look deeper into that statistics. An engineering institute might say, oh, highest salary paid, but look at the average salaries. Look at what happens to the 80% of the class, not the 20% that kind of gets placed. And that's important, that percentage of only 1% getting into a highly esteemed institution, less than 0.5% passing a chartered accountancy, is that the culture that they want their child into? Or are we talking about students who can actually, graduates who can carry the toolkit for the longer span of lives? So it's education and more education to parents. It's peer group discussion with parents, open them up more, do these sessions on what are some of the careers with sciences, what are some careers, open up their minds with statistics. They give you statistics, beat them back with statistics and important vital statistics, not just qualitative. We are here, I'm sure Ali's office in Ashoka or we here at Kriya are here to give you some of that information if that helps you back in talking to some of your parent community.
Thank you, Kala. Unfortunately, folks, we're out of time. I think we could have gone on for another couple of hours. There's so much to talk about. But I think just in these 40 minutes, the amount of insight that we've obtained is remarkable. Just on that last point that Kala made, I think all parents are also working people and they're facing the same changes in their organizations. So I think the question to ask is, are you not seeing it? You know, you're asking your child to go down the conventional path, but are you not seeing your life changing at work? Are you not seeing your organization transforming overnight and things changing exponentially? So I think there was a lot of learning there. Thank you very much, everyone. It was extremely insightful. I think we got many perspectives, but there was common understanding at some level that the days of one size fits all are gone. And I think we all have to keep evolving, help students in as many ways as possible. Very encouraging to hear Anbu talk about what industry is doing to accommodate, not try to fit students into a structure. Thank you very much, folks. And we are all going to continue for the next session. So back to you, Kritika.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ali, Mr. Anbu, Mr. Eddie, Kala, and Tiffany. It was such an incredible panel. And just like Mr. Ali said, it's remarkable how much we've been able to learn in such a short span of time. And we should definitely look at putting this back on the books for a continued discussion at a time really soon. So thank you so much for your incredible insights.